Greetings, my name is Chamomile and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today, we're looking at the Nuiri Sector and the 12th Cerulean Spear Command. If I had my druthers, Nuiri Sector would have been an 11th Blazing Claw command with the rest of the Sith worlds, but Republic High Command refuses to change the boundaries of over-sector commands defined 20 years before I was born, no matter how loudly I yell at the clouds. In fact, the story you're most likely to recognize Nuiri Sector from splits itself across the two over-sectors. The planet Quell is located in 12th Cerulean Spear, which is why it was Jedi General Aayla Secura's problem. Anakin and the 501st Legion were part of 3rd Steel Blade Command, the over-sector army commanded by Obi-Wan Kenobi, whose nominal area of operations was located in the core and inner rim, and which basically never had to defend their actual assigned territory, so they spent the entire war serving as reinforcements for wherever was in the most danger. That's why Anakin and Obi-Wan spent most of their time in the trailing sector supporting 14th Red Tails, but if Aayla Secura and 12th Cerulean were the ones who needed backup, then off to the Nuiri Sector they went. Too late to do anything except bail Aayla out of a losing fleet battle with the Separatists, though, and Anakin nearly got himself killed in the process. Maybe that would have been for the best. They managed to escape into hyperspace and launch themselves pretty much blind, coming out of hyperspace in the next sector over, which is across the border in 11th Blazing Claw. So don't hold your breath on that one. We'll get to it. Someday. According to rumor, Jedi Knights Flynn, Kaibo, and Tachuka Da'un got lured into a trap and wrecked by General Grievous on planet Vandos. This one's not as well sourced as the Aayla Secura story, but it makes sense to me. The Republic banged their head against this sector a couple of times in the first 2 years of the war, and it didn't give way until later. There were no Outer Rim sieges here, so presumably the CIS withdrew from Nuiri Sector completely, giving it up without a fight to focus on more important sectors in the Tion cluster. Count Dooku had a chateau on planet Vajun, although I can't imagine the constant acid rain made it too great of a vacation spot. Darth Vader also had a stronghold here, Bast Castle, a restored Sith stronghold from the days when this sector was in Sith space. Sort of, the boundaries of that region weren't exact and expanded and receded over time as the power of the Sith Empire rises and falls, but Vajun was definitely Sith space at one point, and that's when they built Bast Castle. If you've seen people weeping, wailing, and gnashing their teeth over what we lost in the original planned storyline of Battlefront 3, that game was to follow the events of X1 and X2, two clone troopers, one of whom became a Jedi, the other is Sith, and at one point the Jedi clone helped the New Republic storm Bast Fortress, where it had become an Imperial remnant holdout led by the Sith clone. I don't know how grounded in actual galactic history this storyline is, but at minimum it was intended as a fictional vehicle for a story that crossed paths with lots of real historical events, including the attempts by some of Palpatine's dark side adepts to consolidate around old Sith sites restored by the Empire on planets like Renvar, Felucia, and Vajun. There was a lot of rebel activity in this sector during the Galactic Civil War. Although Nuiri Sector is in the Outer Rim, the rebels attacked the planet Gorman, not to be confused with Gorman, during the Mid-Rim Offensive. Supposedly, the tide of the battle was turned by Imperial AT-ATs. Rebel troopers surrendered after the AT-ATs came down on them, but the locals tried to flee. Rebel Commander Bren Derlin said that he and his troopers surrendered because you can't run from AT-ATs, which, like, what? Yes, you can. Sure, the length of their stride makes them faster than infantry despite their slow pace, but 1, barely, and 2, scatter. AT-ATs have a massive turning radius and are super expensive. The Empire never had that many of them. Running away from them is super easy. That's actually an important part of the Imperial intimidation-based doctrine on using them. They're designed to encourage people to run away instead of standing and fighting. The Falinasi native to planet Lukazek fled to the Kornak cluster after Order 66. They're a Force tradition who refer to the Force as a white current. Like a lot of Force traditions, the Falinasi supposedly had access to Force powers very different from what the Jedi and Sith could do. The Falinasi signature power was Force illusions, and when they found sanctuary from the Empire with the monks of Hakug in the Kornak cluster, they used their illusion powers to disguise the monastery as a smoking ruin. None of that's really confirmed, and people like to tell stories about crazy Force powers, but the Empire's efforts to convince the galaxy that the Jedi were charlatans has aged pretty poorly, and there's pretty solid sourcing on the Witches of Dathomir, so it's not just the Jedi. People sometimes get it into their heads that the Force can only grant a very small set of powers because there's so much overlap between the powers of the Jedi and the Sith, but the Sith are a Jedi offshoot, one that's been reinvigorated with fresh Jedi blood regularly. They have similar powers because they are the same Force tradition. The Nuiri Sector's capital is the planet Gala, and the ruling authority of the sector is the Beju Tala dynasty. Well, it was. They converted to a standard democratic sector government about a decade before the Trade Federation invasion of Naboo. The monarchy had always maintained its rulership mainly as a way of mediating between the mutually hostile hill people, city people, and sea people, but had gotten so unpopular that all three tribes were willing to try this whole democracy thing instead, and not even the late Republic was going to condone a violent crackdown on democratic protesters, so the monarchy was eventually forced to relent. Some of the aristocrats tried to maintain control by spoiling the election, and that was foiled by some Jedi Knights that the Republic had sent just in case someone tried this exact kind of thing. You may have heard of these two Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn.